So, Sarah,
Yes.
we are in our third piece, our third collaboration, and so far in our shared Google Doc, we called this Untitled Space.
Yeah.
So you started this piece, you made the first move. What was your inspiration?
So early this summer, the Falcon 9 rocket launched, which was a collaboration between NASA and SpaceX. And they launched this all-American crew, all-American rocket ship, which has been the first that it's happened in decades. And
Mhm.
this Crew Dragon, I mean, they were fearless. They were going into the unknown, and it was so awe-inspiring. I mean, while I was laying on my couch and doing nothing but like ordering food on, but it was cool to see that the world was doing something bigger and something inspirational and um, going beyond its means. And that's, I mean, it was perfect timing because it was my turn to start a piece, and that's why I started.
You know, it was a dazzling first move because when you sent me the first play, so to speak, it's an illustration of the universe. It's this image without boundaries. It's something that has no constraint. It's something that has nothing but vastness and some definite infinity to it. So it's like a big throwdown, you know. It's like you put that image out there and it was like, okay, good luck with that. And it was an incredibly majestic beginning of something that it was hard to touch, you know. For me to receive the first image and then to make a playback was almost I was so careful at first, wanting to make sure that I didn't cage what to me seemed nothing but endless possibility. So it was a very stunning, startling, beautiful, and bold first move. And I loved it. I loved the surprise of it. I knew you had chosen space as a theme, but you know, that can mean any number of things. It could be the distance between my couch and my chair, you know. So I wasn't sure which space you meant exactly. I had a sense, but it was a grand gesture that you made, and it was beautiful.
Yeah, I mean, your first move, it, I mean, it kind of reminds me of ET when they're trying to communicate to this
Mm-hmm.
thing that you don't know how to communicate to. And you responded with um, this like hello, this SOS call from, from outer space, in this way of communicating um, when you don't know how to communicate. I mean, you did nothing but fantastic moves on this entire piece. So it was an honor to work with you.
So great. I mean, I love the idea of code, and I always have loved the idea of code. And I think space, the idea of space is nothing but some kind of other language that we do and we don't understand. But to put Morse code within the context of space, to me, was a way of trying to put some kind of universal symbol into that, because you know, we think of Morse code when we think of typing SOS, dit 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 dot 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 dit dit dit, and that's a universal language for help. But I thought, no, this piece isn't about help. It's about hello. It's about some kind of invitation or some kind of um, way of being approachable. So it was the only thing I can imagine doing on top of that great, vast, beautiful illustration.
Yeah, and I think we did a really poetic, I think we did the piece poetic justice, exploring the idea of space. I mean, we think about space from on Earth as the sky above us. We think of space, as you had said, like very relevant, 6 feet away from us. Like space is on our mind so often these days.
Mm-hmm,
We're too close to somebody, we're feeling very far from somebody.
mm-hmm.
And the way we explored space in its so many dimensions, whether it be space to reflect or space to work or physical space, or trying to grasp onto something of like air, which is so, intangible. I think we explored it from every single angle, and I think that's what this piece shows.
Yeah, I agree. I think the interesting thing about this piece is it encompasses this incredible contrast that we're living in. You know, whenever I'm out in the world, I evaluate everyone by how far away are they from me. During this pandemic, I have nothing but 6+ feet on my mind, you know, nothing but that. And fortunately, I live in a part of New York State where I can get space around me, right? But I'm also aware that I am physically missing being close to people at the same time, you know? So it's both wanting people to be in the appropriate zone outside of me, but also really missing the idea that I can give somebody a hug or just go get a cup of coffee in somebody's presence and not have to be worried. So, Sarah, what was a challenge for you in the piece? Was there a moment that was particularly challenging for you?
Um, a very tactical challenge of mine was just going back to illustration. I mean, I design apps and websites all day long, and to get back to drawing something meaningful, literal, um, that was actually a challenge for me because I was like, oh, wait, what does an arm look like? And I haven't been in drawing class in over a decade. And so, like, literally taking pictures of where my arm should be or where like the world should be. And that's what I love about working on this too, is that I get to explore things that I don't get to do in my everyday life. And so, yeah, the illustration style was a challenge, but also a fun challenge. How about you?
Well, first of all, I think you're the astronaut. When you introduced the first astronaut, it brought humanity to the piece. It gave the piece like a beating heart. And it was a very beautiful abstraction before that. It was a beautiful concept. It was conceptually very big and austere. But as soon as the person was there, as soon as that idea of a connection was made, the heartbeat showed up in the piece, and the real humanity kind of started seeping through. And that was a beautiful move. And I think for me, the challenge was how to keep the idea of infinite space, but also keep it intimate in a way.
Yeah.
So how to respond to that idea of all the possibilities are there, but wanting us to make sure that, you know, in the end, we were making a piece about connection and not a piece about too much distance. So for me, the challenge was how to respond to the astronaut and how to respond to not wanting it to be too literal, not wanting to make it a piece that was too much about literal space, but a piece that was much more open to the interpretation of what it means to be connected. Or in some ways you could look at that piece and note and feel disconnected, not in a scary way, but just looking at two people, ultimately your second astronaut brought into the idea that, you know, they were reaching for each other. And that's how I see it. And ultimately hopeful. So how to keep that sense of hope alive with the moves that I made. When I introduced the kite, it was a way of adding something a little playful, but also something that was really relatable, and something that also speaks to sort of a universality, a symbol of maybe light, a symbol of air, a symbol of loftiness, a symbol of open space. No one flies a kite unless they have a lot of space. But my challenge really was to respond to the humanity of the astronaut without making it too scientific, without making it too much about the literal space program, but making it more about the universal truth that we all don't know.
Yeah. And that surprised me and delighted me beyond belief when I saw the kite. It was a moment of like, oh shit, what am I supposed to do now? Because I am a literal person. Um, and I think that was, you know, a surprise and a delight and a challenge and whatever one of those buzzwords you want to use. But I was just like, oh, she's gone somewhere. Like she brought this a bigger meaning. It's bigger than it's bigger than space now. It's this poetic idea of space. And I think when I added that astronaut holding on to the kite,
Mhm.
it was this idea of, I mean, it added, I mean, I think about this all the time of like, we cling to things so hard for, to be brought up from our deepest moments. And like, the first astronaut is holding on to the earth because it's literally trying to stay grounded, and then you have this bipolar astronaut which is trying to be lifted up and to be like drifted away, and we're all trying to hold on to something, but whatever that something is, you know, so personal. So whether it is a star or a balloon or a kite or whatever has air which lifts you up, I think that was a surprise for me.
Yeah, I think for me, the surprise was the moment of the second astronaut. It was breathtaking because immediately I started thinking about what it means to reach for something, someone, what it means to hold on to something, anything, a truth, a denial, a rock, an old sweatshirt, like, and during this pandemic, holding on to what we have understood of ourselves, of a world that we don't understand all the time anymore, of a job, of an apartment, of a house, like holding on to small things become deeply meaningful. You know, like the ritual of going to the grocery store now has huge meaning because it is very precious. You have to plan your time. You have to think about what you're wearing. You have to plan your shopping route. At least I do, you know, and so that I am being really thoughtful. So the idea of what we reach for has also shifted as what we're able to reach for has shifted. So that second astronaut to me brought in hope and longing and potentially a missed moment, but also potentially something that would help that person travel far in a good way. So it took me a minute to really understand that that second person was the relatedness. That was the moment that we took something theoretical and you made it solid. Like, you know, your illustration in all of our collaboration so far, it's really your illustration that has brought the characters alive. I've responded to a lot of things, but you have driven the idea of an illustrative quality in each of these pieces, and the astronaut is a great example of that.
Yeah, and I do thank you for saying that. And I think you and I are both big proponents of using text as texture. Like, if there's one thing you've taught me in life is text doesn't have to be text, it can be added as texture. It's a graphic element that is I would say more important than any other element. And so I do want to say, I want to read in the background, I added this element just to add a little depth. So this poem is very long and I'll make sure that it's listed on the website, but I think it reflects really well. I just stumbled upon it one night. I don't sleep very well. And this poem is ironically called Insomnia. And so I was Googling insomnia poems, hoping that that would fall asleep at night one day. And I saw this during this and I was like, oh my gosh, this is everything we're saying. And I think it's really, I mean, that's the beauty of art, is that like you can say the same thing or the same meaning in so many different ways. And we could have taken this idea of space in so many different ways. But let me just read two small verses from this poem and let me see what you think, because in the piece itself, you can't actually see it, but it holds meaning to me now. So, and then it sinks in, that space, all of that motherfucking space is everywhere. We become milky bodies, constellations grasping, clawing for each other as we spin, dance, and spin. Parts of us burn out, glowing as big, miraculous as ever. Then boom, nothing. Firecracker, flash. It's empty, vast, and lonely now, corroded, spent, and ashamed. And so this idea, I'll let you guys read the rest of it, of this idea of space is literally everywhere, and whether it's dark or whether it's light, like we get to determine what that space is. And that's what we're doing on, I mean, you can do so many analysis, but that's what we're doing on a canvas. We're determining what this space is saying. We're determining what our message is. And sometimes it is joyful. We get to dance and we spin, and then sometimes we do struggle and things don't work out the way we did. And I think it's something to note that when people are looking through this piece, you tried adding a layer and it was in there for two or three moves. And then at the end, you decided to take it out. So why don't you, could you give like a tiny bit of background on that?
Yeah, for sure. Before I say that, do you know who the poet is for that?
Oh, of course. It's Brittany Weber, and it was written in August 2013, and it's called Insomnia Mind Battle, Volume 1.
We need to send her an image that she is definitely influencing and
I
part
reflect her.
Go Brittany. So yeah, I had a piece, a move that I added. I added a hand, and I added a hand that was coming in from the right lower corner, and it was reaching for the first astronaut that is closest to us, the one that's holding the world. And I was initially thinking about this idea almost like of a human chain, of one person trying to get to another person, trying to get to another person. I was also thinking about what it would mean if somebody's struggling and they're like out of reach, and you're extending yourself to try to get to them, literally or metaphorically. And it was also about trying to play with the idea of foreground and background. So this hand was not an astronaut hand, it's just a human hand. It sort of started to shift what you think about where space was actually taking place. So I really liked it, and but yet I made the move and I left it there, and I thought a lot about it, and I went back to it, and it in the end I took it out because that's how we play, right? You can put it in, you can take it out. I don't know that I've ever taken anything of my own entirely out. I don't think you've ever taken anything of your own entirely out. We move things, we shift things, we worked with scale, we have permission to do anything. But I went back to the piece for my next play. All my plays were, I think I was all the even numbers. You're 1, 3, 5, 7. I was 2, 4, 6, 8, right? So I went back to for my next move, and I saw the hand, and it took on, at that moment, it also had a feeling of something ominous, not in a way I intended. It felt a little bit threatening, or a little bit perilous. And I don't, whether or not you saw it that way, it wasn't anything I wanted to go near, because it didn't feel at all like my intention. But there was something about it. So I'm like, it's got to go. I tried it out. I thought it was going to work. But it was also a moment when, there's that phrase, less is more. And if a move doesn't add to a piece, if it just is more of a piece, then you don't leave it. If it doesn't enhance something, if it doesn't make it better, if it doesn't make it more interesting or more compelling, then it's just clutter. It's just something you don't need. And at that moment, I realized the hand was making a statement, and it was a visual that didn't, for me, take us to the next level. It just was more. It was more. It wasn't bad. It was just more and more. And we don't have time for more. If I think about time, I think we don't have time for more shit. We don't have time for extraneous stuff right now. We have to be intentional, and you have to be succinct and thoughtful with your speech and with your actions and in your imagery. As artists, we have a responsibility to not be frivolous. And it doesn't mean we don't make beautiful things. And I make cute things and beautiful things all the time, but I'm not frivolous. And there's a difference. So that hand started to wander down a trail of not being meaningful. And I thought, no, it doesn't belong in there.
And not to put you on the spot one more time, but I had to do a little research. You made me a smarter person during this piece. Can you just explain a tiny bit about the hummingbird that's in the background?
Yeah. So Aztec symbols.
Yeah.
From, I'm forgetting the time period. Is it like
Long time ago.
2000 BCE, something like that? So here's the thing. These are essentially symbols that were carved into, found from an aerial perspective on the earth. And there is a cadre of these symbols. I chose the hummingbird because I thought flight, and I thought that sort of infinite way that the birds fly and hover and are suspended, and they're so full of energy and intention. So the symbols originate in a tradition where the symbols are abstract, but also mysterious. Like, nobody really knows how this all came to be.
Yeah, like
in terms of the scale.
Coming the size, and when I was reading, they said like the size of a football field on average. Like how to do that without technology? I mean, it's the same question about pyramids, but it's this idea of art before art had a name.
Right. Art before that there was a way to determine those coordinates in that kind of grand scale. So yeah, I mean, at least the size of a football field and completely proportionate, completely graphically compelling, completely complete, and intended to be so. They weren't accidental. Nothing about them is casual or accidentally done. Everything is about the symbols of um, the kinds of symbols that these are represent fertility, they represent agricultural, they represent the seasons. I think that the deep meaning for them as a culture was about understanding the world we live in and how the cycles of the seasons go and how the moon goes and how the sun goes. For this piece, I just thought the concept was so freaking great because you could only see these symbols from space, from not, you know, you don't have to be that far away, but you have to be way above them. You have to be, you know, hundreds of feet above them to understand the scale of them. So I like the idea of the shift of scale, you know, so we're in space and there's this hummingbird that we could only see from space. And the ancientness of it, while we're talking about like the 21st century and the year 2020 and this space travel, and yet that symbol is ancient.
Yeah, no, it was gorgeous, and that was another one of my like surprise and delight moments during this piece. And yeah, I don't know if we could have explored space any better, and I'm excited to share it with the world.
Go, Sarah and Amy.
Go, Amy and Sarah.
Nice chatting with you, Sarah.
All right.
Hey, what are we going to call this piece?
Yeah, I haven't figured that out.
I want you to think about the fact that Untitled Space is also kind of cool.
I'm thinking it's just gonna stay Untitled Space because that's what it's been in my head for a few weeks
Yeah,
now.
it's growing on me too.
Okay, I'm glad we're both aligned with Untitled Space.
Untitled Space.
All right, it's official. You heard it here on Amy and Sarah.
Breaking news.
Have a wonderful evening, Amy.
Peace out, Sarah.